Thank you very much, Marco. Excited to be back at NOAH. In fact, Marco sent me a note before the NOAH conference telling me that this was going to be my 15th NOAH conference and that Klaus Hommels and I were now the most loyal speakers at the conference. And I was very excited to be named in the company of Klaus. But then I also thought it's a pretty painful reminder how much I've aged and that I should probably order lots of longevity products from Tobi Reichmuth and Mark Bernecker, and you're probably all sick and tired of hearing from me. But it also reminded me that building lasting companies takes time, and that most of us generally overestimate what we can do in the short run and underestimate what we can do in the long run. And I think this is true of NOAH itself. So I believe Marco did the first conference in 2009, and I'm not sure he would have imagined how much impact he would have on the European ecosystem in terms of connecting investors with great companies. And you just need to look at the list of people who are speaking here, and many, many of these companies met investors during NOAH in the past years. And I think the same holds true for Raisin. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary as a company, and it did take some time and a lot of tenacity and persistence to get to where we are today. Let me start by saying a few words why we're actually doing what we're doing. So most of us here in the room don't wake up in the morning and are super passionate about managing our savings. We're passionate about our families, about our friends, about our hobbies, but we kind of want financial peace of mind because our savings basically are a hugely important foundation for our lives. And so with Raisin, we want to enable everyone to get a better deal on their savings in a simple and transparent way, build long-term wealth so you can focus on what you love. We've tried to measure the impact that we've had so far, and we've, since we started, paid out more than 1.5 billion euros in interest to our Raisin customers. And we did that during a time where, for most of that time, most of these customers were getting zero interest, very little interest, or were even being charged negative interest by their home banks. And if we look at next year, we estimate that just for the year 2024, our Raisin customers will accrue interest of more than 2.5 billion euros, and that this will be about $1 billion more than the average interest rate in the market. So how did we get there? What was the actual problem that we tried to solve? So turns out that even though savings deposits don't sound like the most sexy product, they're actually the major building blocks in the global financial system. So people generally hold about a third of their assets in bank deposits, and bank funding comes about 60% from deposits, and 40% of that comes from households. So if we look at that specific market and what has happened over the last 2 years, we see that there's been a massive shift, paradigm shift, in terms of the interest rate environment. The ECB did not raise interest rates for 11 years. So in July 2022, so about a year and a half ago, the ECB did the first interest rate hike in about 11 years. And since then, we've seen the fastest hiking cycle that we've seen in the history of the euro. And while we're probably at the peak of the hiking cycle, and most of us predict that we'll see first interest rate cuts next year, it's very, very clear that positive interest rates are here to stay in pretty much all regions, including the Eurozone, the UK, and the US. So what are households, what are people doing as a result? How are they reacting to this new regime in interest rates? And so what we saw during the time of negative interest rates was that people moved a lot of their money into overnight accounts. And what we're seeing now is that we're seeing a huge shift into fixed-term deposits and longer terms, where people want to get access to higher rates in the market. The problem is, however, that this market is still hugely inefficient. So if you look at how much of those higher rates are banks actually passing on to consumers, it's not a lot. So if you look at the Eurozone and what you would call the pass-through rate, it's below 20%. And even in the US, it's below 50%. So it's still, even though rates are up, pretty difficult for savers to get access to higher and attractive rates. And interestingly, on the other side, it's also quite inefficient and difficult for banks that want to get access to savings deposit funding. And this is the actual problem that we solve with Raisin. So we basically transformed this value chain, and with our platform, we turned cash savings deposits into a marketplace product. And thereby what we can do is, on the one hand, for banks that are interested in sourcing deposits for their funding, they're having a plug-and-play, super efficient way to access savings deposits and reach millions of customers, either through our own B2C marketplaces like Weltsparen in Germany or Raisin in the international markets, or through third-party channels that we power for our B2B partners. And on the other hand, if you're a saver, you can suddenly connect to the platform, and with one single account, you can get access to best-in-class offering of cash savings deposits. And so that creates huge efficiency in the system overall, but it also creates huge value for both banks and savers and huge flywheel effects, because the more banks that are on the platform, the more attractive it becomes for the savers, and the more savers are on the platform, the more attractive it becomes for the banks. So where do we stand in terms of performance and growth of the company? So we've this year crossed 50 billion in AUM on our platforms. In fact, today we're at about 54 billion. And just to give you a sense of speed of growth, we added about 20 billion net new AUM in the last 9 months. The other thing that is quite interesting is that by now it's really a global business. So if we look at that growth in the last 9 months, more than 50% of it came from international markets. And the US is now our second largest market in terms of AUM and contributed about 20% of our growth. However, I'm still convinced that basically in terms of the opportunity in front of us, we haven't even scratched the surface of that opportunity given the size of the market. And if we look at the company, you know, we're backed by a great group of investors. The company is profitable, and we're growing 90% year on year this year. And so I think every year since I spoke here for the first time in 2016, I've said that we're just getting started. But every year that we progress, it actually feels even more true. So please stay all tuned for what's going to happen in the next 10 years ahead of us. And many thanks that you're still listening to us at NOAH, even after 10 years. Thank you very much.